Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Leverett Ball Show. And on this episode, I'm joined by Boone Niederhofer. And anyone who's a big fan of the 2026 Winter Olympics, you'd remember this guy. He competed for Team USA bobsledding as a pusher. And you know what, Boone? It's interesting because on this podcast, I've had some NFL players and some Major League Baseball players. You are the first bobsledder in the history of this podcast to come on as a guest. I'm going to try to not get emotional, but how do you feel making history today?
There's not too many bobsledders out there. So, the fact that any bobsledders get any sort of notoriety is pretty cool.
100%, 100%. And, it's funny because you are a convert. Your background athletically was in football. You actually played college football at Texas A&M and then became a bobsledder. And obviously, I want to talk to you about your background. How you transitioned from
Yeah.
one sport to another. Before we get to that, I just want to talk to you about the 2026 Winter Olympics. I mean, competing in the Olympics is a dream for a lot of kids growing up.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
most kids growing up, they're like, I either want to be in the Olympics or be a podcaster like Leverett Ball. Those are the two most common dreams for young children. But
Yes.
yeah, so I mean, what was it like to actually live what is a dream for a lot of people?
Yeah. I think I think kids from a young age watch the Olympics and think, wow, this is like the peak of athleticism. You know, no matter who you are, no matter what sport you play, I think any athlete probably has a dream of competing in the Olympics. And as I got older and got more kind of sold on playing football for as long as I possibly could, I that was a dream I didn't think was going to come true until I found bobsled and found that it could even be a possibility. But yeah, bobsled. Most every bobsledder is some form of transfer athlete, whether they played football in college or ran track, and we're just looking for anybody who was fast and explosive. So it doesn't matter what sport you play. Like, we even had a swimmer make the team this year, and we had a guy on the team last year who really had no sport background. So anybody can come out and try out for bobsled.
Although the one thing I would say is, all of the people maybe they haven't done bobsledding before, but they are very good athletes. So, if you're in horrible shape, I don't think they're going to take you on the Olympic
Right.
bobsledding team. But no, it's a little bit relatable for me because you played a mainstream sport like football at a very high level, and then you transition into a niche sport like bobsledding, but it's not like you were doing like little league bobsledding as a kid. You
Right.
started playing the sport as an adult at the highest level, and it's a little bit relatable for me because I played baseball my whole life, and I was a college baseball player. But I never played baseball in the pros, but after I got done with baseball, I briefly, for a very hot minute, played semi-pro rugby, and I wasn't on the national team, but I was in like a mini camp for people they were
Yeah.
considering.
Hmm.
Um, and so, but it's weird because like I didn't play rugby my whole life, and then I
Yeah.
was like in
And
a mini camp for the national team. I'm thinking to myself like, what the fuck am I doing here? I guess the coaches thought that also. They thought that also because I didn't make the team. So,
yeah.
but yeah, but
And
I mean, it's relatable.
rugby and bobsled are kind of similar in that occasionally people find them later in life. For lack of a better term, they didn't make it to the next level in the sport that they, initially wanted to play for as long as possible, but found another way to just keep competing.
100%. It was weird. Same thing you mentioned. You have teammates with different backgrounds. Like there was a guy I played semi-pro rugby with who was like had just been cut from the Arizona Cardinals and was trying something
Yeah.
new.
Hmm.
And so it's interesting that the background. But prior to I mentioned your football background, so you played big time college football at Texas A&M. Your teammates there with Johnny Manziel, the Heisman winner and NFL quarterback. Although you had an injury at the end of your college career at A&M that interfered with some of your NFL prospects, but what was your time like, in football?
I played at Texas A&M, and then yeah, like you said, I tore my ACL my last regular season game my senior year. And I didn't necessarily expect to go play professional football, but I at least wanted to give it a shot. There was a couple things there were some things I knew I could do well. I knew I could. I knew I had good hands. I knew I could run fast. I knew I could run a good 40. And didn't get that opportunity because I was hurt, and it just was me thinking that the Lord was taking my life in a different direction, and I was fine with it. I had a good job right out of school, and got some good work experience right out of school. So it was like I didn't necessarily think it was a bad thing. Obviously, I grew up playing football, and obviously wanted to make it to the NFL, but at that time in my life, I was okay doing something else.
I mentioned you played with Johnny Manziel there. Everyone knows him as Johnny Football, although you mentioned before we started recording that, you grew up in kind of the same area as him, so you were familiar with him before everyone heard of him.
He's a high school football legend.
Oh, I can imagine. He would make plays and do his money sign. What was it like, getting to know him?
Yeah. So he was a year older than me. So, he redshirted his freshman year. I joined the team in 2012 as a walk-on. So, I redshirted my freshman year and did scout team. And so I was never really on the field with Johnny. But, I joined the A&M football team in summer of 2012. That whole summer, we're going through summer workouts, and as two kids from San Antonio, we kind of connected a little bit. But prior to him becoming the starting quarterback at A&M, and even that first half of that season at A&M, he just was another dude on the team. And obviously he was very talented, and that was clear. But he just was kind of one of the guys.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because he won a Heisman in his first year as a starter, but I remember I saw an interview with him where he said that, like, going into that season when he won the Heisman, his only goal was to just get more playing time because he hadn't been playing prior to that. So, like you said, he was kind of one of the guys.
We had a fifth-year senior, his name was Jamil Showers, and him and Johnny were in a quarterback competition in fall camp, and they didn't name the starter until the week of our first game against Florida that season.
Wow, that's crazy. I mean, and no disrespect to other QB, I think they made the right decision.
Yes.
Safe to say his A&M career turned out all right.
Yes.
But
it was clear that Johnny was an incredible athlete.
Oh yeah, and some of the plays he made in college were like he would like jump over someone and then juke three people and then like throw an 80-yard pass while he was falling down. It was like it looked like a oversized kid dominating recess sometimes. But yeah, he was amazing. But then, you got out of football and you were working as an engineer, then made the transition, into bobsledding and the Olympics. You had a former A&M football teammate who was in bobsledding who recommended that you do that. So when football wrapped up for you, and you were working as an engineer, were you sitting there at the desk at your engineering job expecting to be in the Olympics, or did that kind of come out of nowhere?
It came out of nowhere. Out of school, I was like, I'm ready to just get my career started, and, was pretty sold on, I'm just going to pursue this career and, see where it takes me. And I worked, the company I was working for right out of school got bought after about a year and a half of me working there. And then I was job searching again. I worked for an oil and gas company. I got my degree in petroleum engineering. So I just was, had a job where I was using my degree. And at that time, oil prices it wasn't a great time. I think oil was at like $45. And so not many people were hiring. And so I job searched for a bit and, ended up searched for a couple months. And I was actually on a hiking trip at Zion National Park when my buddy Sam Miller, who was the 12th man at A&M, he called me just to kind of catch up, just see what was going on. And I was telling him about my job, and he was like, dude, if you're not working right now, let's go try out for the bobsled team. And had a pretty good sales pitch for me. And I was like, yeah, let's do it.
Wow.
Put the job search on hold and went all in.
So the thing is, you mentioned like the oil industry wasn't doing too great at that time, and the job market for people working in that field was tough. So hypothetically, if the job market in oil had been better, would you have never gone to the Olympics?
Yeah. I think hypothetically, if I had found a job right away, and Sam and I have that conversation later when if I had found another job, there's definitely a possibility that I say no. So it is interesting how all that timing works out.
Wow, wow, I mean that's a cool story, and yeah, it's funny how things work out. I mean, it's funny the way I got into broadcasting was when I transferred colleges, I lost credits, and my advisor
Yeah.
told me I should do the campus radio station because you get 3 extra credits per semester for doing campus radio in addition to taking a full course load. So like the way I got into I work with ESPN now, but the reason I got into campus radio wasn't to be on ESPN someday. It was
Yeah.
because I was worried I was going to be like
Just to get out of school
yeah, I
faster.
was going to be like a 37th year senior. People were like, who brought their grandpa to campus? So yeah, so it's funny how things work out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, who knows? I mean, maybe if it hadn't been for that, I'd be a petroleum engineer right now or something. Who knows? But
Yeah.
I don't know if I have
I
the
know.
right qualifications.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. When Sam asked me to try out, I stopped training. I rehabbed my knee a little bit coming out of school, but was not rehabbing to try to be an elite athlete. And so I was coming off working a desk job, and actually my initial tryout at the first combine that I went to for bobsled, I really didn't perform well and only got invited to the rookie camp basically off of Sam's recommendation to the coaches.
Dude, shout out to Sam.
So, yeah.
I mean, yeah. I mean, wow.
So it's like
Wow.
even if I had this dream of wanting to do bobsled, I probably wouldn't have got invited to camp if I also didn't have a friend who was competing in bobsled.
Wow. That's awesome. And yeah, and I mean, so obviously, then you got into bobsledding and when you went to I mentioned the winter 2026 Olympics earlier, when you actually got to the Olympics, I mean, I talked earlier about how it's a dream for a lot of people to be in the Olympics, but like when you're in the moment, do you even think about, I'm in the Olympics, this is such a unique experience? Or are you just like so focused on competing, you just kind of black out?
Yeah, it's interesting for bobsled is one of the last events at the Olympics. So, we got there on January 30th to Cortina, and we didn't compete until we had 2-man week. I think we raced on like the 14th and 15th, and then we raced 4-man on the 21st and 22nd. So I wasn't competing until February 21st, 3 weeks after we got there. So we kind of did have a little bit of time to kind of enjoy the process a little bit. That week of opening ceremony, I just remember being very reflective of the journey that got me there and trying to be really thankful, trying to soak in the moment. So it actually was pretty cool to kind of have a little bit of time to enjoy being there in Cortina. And some athletes, it's a little bit different where they compete really early and then have like 2 weeks after they compete to just hang out in Cortina, where we as kind of the opposite, where we couldn't like completely, shut off for those first couple weeks that we're there. But we did have a little bit of a moment to relax.
Well, and I've heard about, for the athletes who compete early in the Olympics and then stay there in the Olympic Village, I've heard some of them party pretty hard. It's a pretty fun experience. Yeah. So, but you mentioned, like you said, you got there, you were there for a while, then you competed at the end. So I guess maybe when you're there prior to competing, you couldn't go out and get hammered right before, your Olympic competition. You got a strict schedule. But I mean, also, when you're like meeting other Olympic athletes from other sports there, I know you already played high level sports. You played with lots of NFL guys and against lots of NFL guys at A&M. But were there any like Olympic athletes you met from other sports where you're like, whoa?
I didn't get to personally meet some of the more well-known Team USA athletes. The sports that were in Cortina were, obviously the 3 sliding sports, bobsled, skeleton, and luge, and then curling. And then women's downhill skiing was also in Cortina, but most of the skiers, they stayed on a different side of town. All the ski mountain was kind of on the opposite side of town to where the village was. So it made more sense for them to stay somewhere else. So I didn't
Okay.
get to meet like Lindsey Vonn or anything like that.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. Yeah, so you don't have like
But
a autographed ski from Lindsey Vonn in your
yeah,
house somewhere. No, okay, I got
we did get to interact with the curling team quite a bit, and it was fun to get to know those guys. We traded pins a little bit. Corey, the mixed doubles team that won silver, we got to meet them some, and then interact with the men's team and the women's team as they were kind of competing at different times. So that was pretty cool.
Gotcha. Yeah, that sounds like an awesome experience. I guess also though, I mean, I mentioned you already played high level football, but also just like I feel like when you're there in the moment, you have to kind of act like you belong. It's the same way like for me, if I have pro athletes on my podcast, like the most well known pro athlete I ever had was Michael Strahan, but like I have to like do my job and act like I'm qualified to interview him as opposed to being like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm interviewing Michael Strahan. So you have to act like you belong. So it
Yes.
makes sense, you weren't just like kissing everyone's ass while you're there, you were
Yep.
pretty chill about it. But you also, so I mentioned you were doing engineering prior to being an Olympic athlete, but you still do engineering. And some people don't, casual sports fans don't know that there are Olympians who have other jobs outside of their sport.
Yeah.
So, and I know you're also a father of two. I mean,
Yep.
so you do engineering, parenting, sounds like you're a pretty busy guy. How are you able to balance everything?
Mostly due to my wife. She has, this whole journey would not have worked if she was not as on board with the whole thing as I was. She was just as invested in it as I was. And, you know, um, the last quad, I, put the job search on hold and competed full time. Spent a lot of time up in Lake Placid. We have the training center there where you can get free lodging and free food while you're there. So for athletes who like compete in the sport of bobsled, where you're not really making any money just by doing the sport, you kind of have to find other revenue streams. But if you go live in Lake Placid, you can live with really no expenses. So we did that for a bit while I was not working. Chloe had a job in Dallas that she was working, and then I did not end up making the games in 22. And then after that, we decided that I needed to get a real job for a little bit. And so that was when I kind of got back in the job market, found a job in oil and gas, and we moved to Midland, Texas in summer of 22. And then eventually kind of got the itch to want to do bobsled again, and job searched and was just upfront in my interviews, like, hey, this is what I want to do. I want to go compete for Team USA bobsled. I'll have to be gone for months out of the year. Is this something that you'd support? And had that conversation, and had a lot of people say, hey, man, that's really cool, but we're not going to be able to do that. But
Right.
finally got one yes, and that was all I needed.
Perfect. So I guess you mentioned, your teammate Sam helping you out, also your wife Chloe being so supportive. So shout out to Chloe and Sam, I guess, for,
Yep.
helping you reach your Olympic dreams. You mentioned also, interviewing with people and saying I'm also an Olympic athlete. Every story you tell me somehow reminds me of past experiences I've had, because like a few years ago I took a year off from broadcasting and I worked in sales for a year. I was just burned out from the TV lifestyle and I just wanted to work a 9 to 5 and be a normal person for a year. But I remember like on my first day of orientation, my job, people were like, "What company did you work at before this?" And I was like, "I was a television host on ESPN." They're like, "Wait, are you actually being serious?" And like, you're here at this sales job now in the cubicle, cold calling people. So it's like a
Yeah.
different world. But I guess you kind of experienced different worlds as well,
Yeah.
being an Olympian, being an engineer, and what are your plans, in the future? Do you want to compete in the next Winter Olympics? And, are you looking to continue engineering? And I mean, obviously you have a family, you have a career. What are the things you're looking forward to down the road?
Yeah. I think in a vacuum, I would love to try to push for 2030, but just life circumstances, work circumstances, I'm not going to completely close the door on it, but if we get the right situation, I think there's a possibility we could try again, but we'll see.
Nice, nice. Yeah, but I mean, at the end of the day, being an Olympian is something people can never take away from you. You know, the fact that you're in the 2026 games, and you said you might have interest in doing 2030 as well, but that's definitely a flex. You know, if you're in like a, tell a fun fact about yourself session or two truths and a lie, that's a good thing to have for those situations.
When I was job searching, after the previous games, I really think that having bobsled on my resume made me stand out. So,
yeah.
I can definitely, it's kind of both. I kind of needed a job to support my bobsled dream, but I also needed bobsled to get the current job to get me qualified, a qualified enough employee to kind of do this job. So the whole thing, a lot of doors had to open for it to work out.
It's cool. It's cool how it all fits together. But also for anyone who wants to keep up with what you're doing, in the near future, whether it's college football fans, bobsledding fans, engineering fans, what are your social media handles that people can follow you at?
My social media name is Boone_Saw.
Okay.
Boone Saw.
Nice. Easy to remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So yeah, everyone give Boone Saw a follow. But Boone, it's been, or I don't know, I should say Boone or Boone Saw, but it's been great having you on the podcast today, and sounds like you've done a little bit of everything. Maybe your next career will be as an astronaut. But thanks for your time today and all your insight.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It was fun.
Absolutely. All right. So once again, everyone, you have been listening to the Leverett Ball Show. Thanks for tuning in.